At the tender age of 16, John Jacob left home for bustling London, where, under the guidance of his uncle, he began to learn the art of making musical instruments. Our beautiful English capital in its grandeur not only gave Astor knowledge of the English language, but also allowed him to undergo thorough training in the field of commerce. In 1784, Astor traveled to the United States. In his pockets were some hopes and a collection of several flutes for sale. He chose New York as his new home, where he opened a small but ambitious store selling flutes. The 1794 treaty that allowed Americans to trade in Canada served as the catalyst for the creation of an empire that would go on to create America's first old money family. By the turn of the century, Jacob had amassed a fortune of $6 million, enormous wealth for the era when America was less than 20 years old. And he became a leading light in the FER market. He then diversified his portfolio by trading FER for Chinese tea and investing in the emerging Manhattan real estate market, becoming a prominent figure in FER transactions in China. In addition, John Jacob's brother Henry, a horse racing enthusiast and German immigrant like himself, acquired a thoroughbred messenger who traveled from England to America in 1788. From this noble racehorse came all the standard grain horses in America, adding a unique chapter to the Astor family legacy. After the death of Meriwether Lewis in 1809, the search began for an able governor for the area. Astor saw an opportunity, proposing a bold plan to monopolize and expand the FER trade to the Pacific Ocean. Pacific Ocean. He hired Wilson Price Hunt, a St. Louis businessman, to lead an overland expedition to the Columbia River. This journey, although fraught with disastrous decisions, led to major discoveries and paved the way known today as the Oregon Trail. This journey became the basis for the American exploration of the states of Oregon and Washington. To get an idea of how wildly enormous this fortune was by today's standards, compare Astor's wealth to America's gross national product at the time. America's gross national product at the time, his net worth would be comparable to $121 billion in 2023, rivaling only Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk on the world stage. And John Jacob showed no less of a penchant for philanthropy, donating $400,000 from his treasury to create the Astor Library, a respected institution that would later merge with the Lenox Library to become the Lenox Library and the eventually iconic New York Public Library. Now, his firstborn son, John Jr., suffered from a depressing combination of ill health and mental problems from birth, so John Jacob's will provided him with an allowance sufficient to provide for his sustenance during the uncertain times ahead. Thus, the lion's share of the Astor's vast fortune, together with the fate of their family empire, was placed on the able shoulders of his second son, William. Thereby making the next move on the chessboard towards the dominance of old money, dominance of the Astor family in this game of family intrigue. So William Backhouse Astor, Sr., named after William. Backhouse, a merchant friend of his father, would prove his worth during his life as a competent assistant to his father's thriving export business. At the same time, he carefully poured capital into the fertile soil of Manhattan real estate. But building on his family's now legendary business reputation, William expanded the empire's real estate portfolio, building more than 700 stores and homes in growing New York City. His real estate. His ventures in the Central Park area led to the exponential growth of the family's assets, and himself an astute operator. He not only preserved, but also increased the Astor family fortune. His diligent efforts led to greater prosperity for the family, and his legacy resulted in a staggering fortune estimated at nearly $50 million. It seemed as if Midas himself had passed on his golden touch to the following Astors, and they used this gift with amazing accuracy. However, in the long arc of family lore, the most important step William took was characteristic of old money dynasties: strategic intermarriages. On the 20th day of May, 1818, he took the hand of Miss Margaret A. Leda Rebecca Armstrong, children of Senator John Armstrong, Jr., and Elida, sister of Horatio Gates Armstrong. On her mother's side, she came from the famous Livingston clan. Her mother was the youngest offspring of the distinguished judge Robert Livingston and his wife Margaret. In addition, its pedigree included such luminaries as Founding Father Robert R. Livingston and Secretary of State Edward Livingston. On the other hand, her father, John Armstrong Jr., bore the honorary title of President James Madison's second Secretary of War. By the end of his reign, he had increased the family treasury to between $75 million and $100 million, about $2.5 billion to $3.5 billion in today's dollars. Although, again, we have to remember that this was a time when the US GDP was much lower than it is today. So $3 billion back then could be closer to 80 or 90 billion when compared to today's economy. John III's proudest achievement, however, was the founding of the English branch of the Astor dynasty. It was this branch that cemented the Astor name among the British and a lasting legacy that continues to occupy a place of honor among the aristocracy to this day. We'll say more about this in a minute. So, the daughter of William and Margaret, Laura Eugenia Astor, born in 1824, married a man with the now familiar American name Franklin Hughes Delano on September 17, 1844. Now, our story will stop at William Astor Jr., the bearer of the illustrious American heritage of his ancestor. However, it was his wife, the imposing Caroline Schermerhorn, who became the head of the New York elite. Elites creating the basis of high society. Born into the privileged echelon of New York's Dutch aristocracy, Caroline, or Lena as she was affectionately known, was born into the privileged echelon of New York's Dutch aristocracy on September 22, 1830, a Schermerhorn, a descendant of the city's earliest settlers. Her father, Abraham Schermerhorn, made his fortune in shipping and had a net worth of $500,000, a significant sum for the time, equivalent to $13.74 million today. Helen Van Cortlandt, perhaps white, from the noble Schermerhorn family, was her mother. Fate brought Caroline Schermerhorn and William Astor Jr., grandson of John Jacob Astor, into a harmonious union in 1853. An intriguing story unfolded in 1862 when a couple commissioned a fashionable four-story brownstone townhouse on 355th Avenue, the address that would become home to the Empire State Building. Contrary to popular belief that she always paid more attention to high society than to family, Mrs. Astor, contrary to popular belief, always paid more attention to high society than to family. Than for her family, Mrs. Astor, having spent much of her years as the mother of small children, devoted herself to family and housekeeping. In addition, a rich inheritance from her parents allowed her gain financial independence, uncharacteristic for women of her era. Over the years, Caroline Astor's sphere of influence, aptly named the 400, became the cornerstone of New York society Gilded Age. The city's population exploded after the Civil War, and wealthy settlers and immigrants challenged the traditional stronghold of New York's elite. Teaming up with respected social arbiter Ward McAllister, a relative of Samuel Cutler Ward, who had entered the Astor clan through marriage, Mrs. Astor began to formulate rules of propriety and select acceptable newcomers to her respected circles. McAllister famously argued that amid the splendor of Gilded Age New York, only 400 people could truly be considered members of fashionable society. The society queen, as she came to be known, Mrs. Astor strengthened her exclusive circle, holding an annual grand ball on the third Monday in January. Receiving an invitation was considered the highest award, a golden ticket confirming a place in the brilliant building of New York society. Caroline Astor in that era was known for her impeccability, was famous for her impeccable grace, scrupulous discretion, and language that did not tolerate quarrel. Her friendly demeanor masked some aloofness. She was never prone to unsolicited intimacy and did not like to share secrets. Her social sphere was rigid, an impregnable bastion of old money, unshakable in the maelstrom of changing times and values. However, for all their unshakable traditionalism, the fame of the Astors went far beyond the borders of their native shores. Their names have become synonymous with the elite, The press is inexplicably drawn to their lives, splendor, scandals, in particular, the intrigue with Lady Caroline's outfits. Meanwhile, across the pond, the Astor family grew increasingly noble, cultivating its prestige through the illustrious titles of Viscount Astor and Baron Astor of Havre. First, a wealthy American Astor named William Waldorf. Astor took a bold step, move to British soil in 1891 and then take up the mantle of British citizen in 1899. As a mark of his outstanding contribution to wartime charity, he was created a barony in 1916 and created a viscount a year later. Thus was born Viscount Astor, granted the peerage of the United Kingdom on a summer day in 1917, forever inscribing the Astors in the annals of British aristocracy. Mid-century, in 1956, another title was created in the peerage of the United Kingdom. This was the title of Baron Astor of Havre, given to the influential newspaper baron and conservative politician John Jacob Astor, the fourth son of William Waldorf Astor, first Viscount Astor. In the modern world, some Astor descendants, such as William Astor, fourth Viscount Astor, continue to wield influence, particularly in the British House of Lords. British House of Lords. However, over time, the family's fortunes have diminished, and some heirs are experiencing financial difficulties. One of the clearest symbols of this decline is the family's 420-acre estate, which now shows signs of neglect due to lack of funds for maintenance. Thus, the Astor name, once synonymous with America's wealthy elite, faced a gradual decline in its prestige. While their mark on the New York City skyline and American landscape remains indelible, their once revered status is quietly receding.